And I'm going to welcome everyone. We've got about 3 minutes and we will go ahead and get started right at 1 o'clock. And remember too that we are going to be on Facebook Live. If for Zoom reasons don't work out or what have you, it would be, or if you want to take us with you and you want to go on Facebook Live, you can do that as well. But we will get started right at 1. And it looks like we already have a good participation going on. So we have over 30 people jumping on real quick.
Do you want to make a webinar appearance, Sophia?
Sophia.
I just got a massive load of plants delivered.
Oh, fun, of course.
Like David's like, oh my God, there's like 8 boxes on the porch.
Oh, good. I thought you were maybe meeting a giant truck.
Oh no, they didn't even ring the doorbell. They just left them.
Are they edibles?
I don't know. I think that some of the boxes are from Bailey nurseries, so no, they'll probably be ornamental shrubs. I do a lot of trialing, and what they don't understand is that I run out of room for things like hydrangeas. You know,
Yes.
those things don't die; they just live.
Right. Yeah. Those.
I need more annuals.
Stuff like that. Okay. We're just about to go Facebook Live also. We're going to dismiss that. And it's working. Perfect. Hello, everybody out in Facebook land also. So we're waiting for 1 more minute, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to get our introductions going. But so where did the kitty go, Brie?
Oh, she is right here. She's just behind the computer doing tech support. Hi, this is Ava Grace.
Hi,
the newest Foodscape crew member.
Good digger, I bet.
Oh, yes.
Well, everyone, it's 1 o'clock, and we want to welcome you to the first inaugural Master Gardener Volunteer Book Club. And I know we've been reading our, Foodscape Revolution books, and we started back in March, and we had all of April, and then now we're wrapping it up here in May. So we are so thrilled to welcome Brie, the plant lady Arthur, all the way from Fuqua, North Carolina. Did I say it right?
It's Fuquay Varina.
Fuquay Varina. Well, I think they're going to change it to Fuquay Farina because you've been growing so many grains up there. But
I agree.
So I'm Wendy Wilber, the State Master Gardener Coordinator, and today we are welcoming Brie Arthur, who wrote the Foodscape Revolution, and she also wrote the Great Grains book. And I'm sure she's got another one waiting in the wings. So welcome, Brie.
Thank you.
This is a webinar, so you all won't be able to share screens, but we do want you to go ahead at this point and then go ahead in the chat box and let us know where you're joining us from today. So the chat box is at the bottom of your screen. If you highlight it, the toolbar should show up. And we have Dolly Johnson is from here, and Eric is from Orlando, and Jenny is from Orlando, Heather's from Orlando, Cheryl is from Jacksonville, Marion is from High Springs, Port Charlotte, Coral Gables, Melbourne, Gainesville, Jacksonville, all over the place, Palm Bay, Avon Park, Crystal River, Edgewater, Punta Gorda, and Winter Springs, beautiful place. Oh, hi, Rita. Rita's from Winter Springs. She's a good friend of mine. Orlando, and this is like Rumpus Room when we do it. Anderson, South Carolina, I've been there. It's a beautiful place. Lake City, Florida, Merritt Island. We've got Peggy from Ocala joining us. Carol's here from Gainesville. So we've got a really great turnout, and we are going to be going statewide with this great information that we have today. And I want to let you know how it's going to go. I'm going to ask Brie a series of questions. She's going to respond, and Madeline is going to monitor the chat box here on Zoom and let us know what the questions are. Also, she'll be monitoring on Facebook Live the questions from there as well. So wherever you are, if you want to go ahead and put a question in the comments or a question in the chat box, we will go ahead and get started with the review. All right, Madeline. Get another one. So the foodscape is to grow food alongside your flowers, right? Within the landscape that already exists. And Brie, I just want to have you talk a little bit about kind of do an overview, and then we're going to jump into this this question. But you know, when I first saw you speak, when the Shapiros brought you to Gainesville, your call was to, can't we do better? And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, you know, I've been working in horticulture for 20 years, and over the course of that time, I guess maybe out of exuberance and being naive, thinking that the landscape industry would eventually evolve into something that really serviced our communities in an extremely meaningful way, meaning that we wouldn't just be mow, blow, and go, and we wouldn't just be shearing shrubs into meatballs, but we would be providing a service that's essential. And it didn't necessarily happen, so I decided that I had to make it happen, or at least get other homeowners to understand the opportunities that are just existing within the boundaries of our landscape, without you having to, you know, rip out grass or buy, you know, expensive lumber and you know, try and reinvent a space that may or may not work. And with homeowner association regulations, it can be so challenging to figure out a way to be able to just grow vegetables. And I know from my own experience, I've lived in neighborhoods with HOA covenants ever since I bought my first house in 2005. And they were very strict about not growing vegetables in my front yard, but that was the only place that I had full sun, and vegetables need sun. So I couldn't grow them in my wooded backyard, which was what they were saying was allowed. And so over the period of maybe the last 15 years, I started experimenting with just sort of hiding vegetables in and amongst my ornamental plants. And at one point, I actually was awarded Yard of the Year. It was one of those life-altering moments because, first of all, I was growing food because I was too poor to go to the grocery store. For those of you who don't know, I worked as a grower and propagator, and it's a very fulfilling job, but it's not always a job that earns you a lot of money, particularly when you have a mortgage and student loans and car payments and, you know, all the other stuff that makes life expensive. So I was growing vegetables literally because I was hungry. I needed to have a food source. And when they awarded me that, not only did it give me the confidence to say, I can share this strategy with other people with an interest in growing food, but it came with a $500 gift certificate to a grocery store, which I desperately needed. So from that moment, I really started to look more critically at sunny, open landscape areas as an opportunity to incorporate the vegetables and fruits that you love to eat. And whenever I work with anyone, you know, I have them write down a list of what they've eaten for the last 7 days. And then we find the vegetables or fruits that recur over and over again. And we focus on figuring out where and how they can grow those things in a meaningful way so they can actually change a habit at a grocery store. And I think that's a really powerful part of recognizing how your landscapes can be part of food production when you're like, no, I actually get, you know, 6 months of X, Y, and Z from this landscape. So I really depend on this area now for something more than just being pretty.
Yeah. Okay, so our first question is about the blank slate. What advice do you have for starting a blank slate? And we actually got several photos of people with just a blank yard, and they did not live in an HOA. And so that blank slate can seem really overwhelming. What is your advice there?
So my best advice always is, even if you're not drawing it to scale, I think there's something about drawing it on a piece of paper, understanding the square footage so that you can wrap your head around how much room you actually have. And then I think also writing down a list of priorities. I want to grow corn, or I want to have citrus, or, I want to have a nitrogen fixer, so I'm going to do a ground cover of peanuts. Thinking about it in a creative way, but I think there's a lot to be said when you have it written down so that you have something to refer to so that you don't get distracted. And then also really think about how you can incorporate a handful of permanent trees, shrubs, perennials, things that are going to do well in your environment so that you have this sort of permanent framework that no
Right.
matter what vegetables you're growing, you have these other plants that will serve this not only ornamental purpose, but they're going to be more biologically diverse than the plants that you're growing to eat. So they're going to bring in beneficial insects, which will ultimately help with some of your problem bugs and then ultimately some of your disease issues. So I think that the whole idea here is that all of these plants play really well together. And it's to your benefit to have as many plants that you love incorporated all in one space.
Right. So when I think about those permanent plants, I think of them as anchors. There's
Yes.
the anchors, and for me, they're usually evergreens, so they can anchor me through multiple seasons. And and they should probably be native, or definitely in our case, Florida friendly, so we can attract pollinators, beneficials, provide ecosystem services along with that as well. And another thing I like to do with the blank slate, nobody asked me, but I'm telling you, is that I take a photo of the space, and then I print it black and white on the printer, and then I just kind of pencil in 3D. So with our technology now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a 2D drawing, although that is good, but you can even do a 3D drawing just by sketching on your photograph.
That's great advice, and that is easy to do. And, for people who have like the fancy new iPads, you can actually draw right on the photograph digitally.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. All right, so our next question is, Madeline is going to get us here. Okay, our soils, here in Florida, we were once a giant sandbar, and I think we still are. Our soils are often sandier than elsewhere in the country. And Bill Silverman had asked a little bit earlier in the week, he said he usually puts in kind of a custom blend into his soil, but you always use compost. And kind of if you could talk about your soil amendments and how, maybe that plays in with our sandy soil a little bit.
Well, one thing I have in common with Florida is that I live in all sand as well. We were formerly a river basin, and we're still in a floodplain. So when we get hurricanes, we often flood, and I don't have any clay where I live, even though a few miles away is Carolina clay. So I relate wholeheartedly. I've been gardening here. This is my 9th season growing on sand, and there's lots of benefits. There's lots of drawbacks, and putting in organic matter is the best thing that you can do, because that will really help with nutrient retention, water retention, so that you're not having to irrigate as often as you would otherwise. I do a couple different things now. I initially started off by buying topsoil in mass. And I unfortunately brought in some real big problems. I brought in a load of soil that was infected with a bacterium called Ralstonia, and that's made it very challenging to grow any plants in the Solanaceae family. So I have beds that I can't grow specific plants in. I also brought in a lot of weed seeds, specifically nutsedge. And once you've got nutsedge, you'll never have it. I swear that could probably grow on Mars. So I did become very particular about where I was getting my soil. And I think that's a really important part of bringing off-site compost or soils into your garden, is understanding where they're coming from and what ingredients are being used to mix in. And, you know, sometimes these questions are difficult to get answers to, but if you're using soil that is an animal-based compost, it's really important to understand what those animals ate, because you can sometimes buy killer compost, which means animals ate a grain that was treated with a persistent herbicide. And that means that when you put that compost down, there's still active herbicide and your plants will develop herbicide damage. And so, you know, these are things. We don't have a great regulatory system for compost. So these are things that you have to ask your suppliers and demand answers for. I hope one day that we will have a better approach to understanding where our composts come from and how they're made. One thing that I've done, and which was really a big part of writing Gardening with Grains, is I've started employing farmer approaches to my residential landscape by putting in cover crops and growing grains, not so much for the purpose of eating them, but for the purpose of growing out their biomass and then mowing it down in place and allowing all of that to compost, so that I know all of that was not treated with an herbicide and it breaks down very quickly. This is very specific to wheat. Many people have purchased wheat straw, you know, to get, say, grass seed to germinate. Well, you can grow your own wheat straw and use that as a base of organic matter to compost in your garden. And that's helped me significantly. And the advantage of grains and legumes, both have, you know, relatively deep root systems. The legumes offer nitrogen fixation, so that will help reduce your needs for additional fertility. And long term, you do this season after season, you can really develop a beautiful soil profile as a result of using these cover crops.
Saying cover crops and bringing in compost from a known source. We actually had a terrible run-in with a soil company here in North Central Florida that had been getting soils or cow manure that was tainted with the grazon, and nothing was germinating. People were calling the extension office, what's happening? My plants won't grow. He was selling, unbeknownst, he didn't know, selling to organic producers. And now they've got tainted soil, so it's really important to know that source. But kind of back to the, you know, how fancy do you need to get? Do you need to put in the sphagnum and the somebody was using perlite and they were using peat moss, and I think you can spend a lot of money. I don't know if it's necessary.
I agree. I actually have had some issues with Pythium being persistent in peat moss, so I really stay away from peat moss now. I think that particularly with tomatoes, which are so finicky and like they're the highest maintenance divas that anyone will ever grow. Speaking of divas, she wanted to make another appearance. um, I've had a lot of wilt issues, you know, different early, mid, and late season blight as a result of using peat moss. And of course, perlite is not really peat moss, or perlite is there to increase drainage. So
Right.
if you have sandy soil, I don't think you need to add perlite at all.
No.
I prefer to stick with organic matter, and specifically organic matter that I have a little more control over it. I don't know if this is showing my control freak OCD tendency,
Well,
but you know, I think a $5 investment in something like oats or barley or wheat for the winter time would make a huge difference in the long run if you did that year after year. Allowing their roots to decompose in place and mowing that biomass back down. All of that really will make a world of difference. You'll see that you end up with several inches of delicious Midwestern looking soil if you start to just grow these cover crops. And you know, you don't have to do it in mass, but fill in the open mulch areas. And you know, at this time of year, I think, you know, peanuts are a reasonable option. I don't know, like we grow peanuts all summer here in North Carolina. They're a farm crop in all the fields around me. But you know, any legume, I also recommend crimson clover as a cool season legume option. And not only do they fix nitrogen, but if you mow that green matter back down, all of that breaks down and helps with your soil profile.
We're getting a couple of good questions. Somebody wants to know your opinion of vermicomposting.
So I love worms. I keep reading about these exotic worms that are bad and that they're, you know, eating other beneficials, and I just haven't had that experience personally. I have a lot of earthworm activity in my garden, and I certainly, in school programs, we always do vermicomposting, you know, in the boxes so that the kids can see how the worms decompose all the stuff in the compost and create this beautiful organic matter. And I think it's something certainly beneficial. It can be very expensive to buy in, particularly if you're growing on a large amount of square footage. But I would encourage you to you know, cultivate that as best you can. I'm sorry, the kitten's like hitting the the computer screen.
Okay, so someone also was wondering what type of peanut you're planting.
That's a good question. I gleaned my peanuts from a farm field, and I don't know the variety. Basically, I will grow any peanut that I can find access to. You know, I found Baker Creek Heirloom Seed is starting to offer them through their website, and certainly farm stores, usually not as much garden centers, but farm stores will often sell raw peanuts by the pound so that you can grow them. And I haven't met a peanut variety that I didn't like. So
yeah, our local farm stores or feed and seeds usually have peanut. And we've got a great document on at the University of Florida EDIS on growing backyard peanuts. So that would be great. And Dawn says Tractor Supply usually has peanuts. So that's, yeah.
Tractor Supply is full of practical stuff.
And fashion. They have shirts there too.
Yes, they do.
So Madeline, you have some questions from Facebook?
No, we do not.
Nope, we don't. Okay, so we are, I just want to say, Lisa Athern, I see your comment. I'm going to save it for a minute or two. So Florida gardeners often struggle with non-native species like armadillos. Any advice for dealing with burrowing animals? I know you address deer, and I'm wondering what you do for burrowing animals, pests.
Well, so first let's talk about armadillos, because they're a nightmare, and they're heading north, and they're like 30 miles south of where I live. So I am suspecting in the next few months I'm going to have armadillos, and I'm not okay with that. I do have one product that I recommend for armadillos, which is the I Must Garden armadillo repellent.
Oh.
And I am giving you this advice coming from other gardeners in areas infected with armadillos, that they say this is the one thing that really works, that's inexpensive. You can buy it online if your garden center doesn't carry it. It's I Must Garden. Now for other burrowing animals, I have like the world's largest vole population.
Okay.
And universally, voles seem to be a problem for everyone. And one solution that's pretty practical and creative is being able to grow garlic along your bed edges through the cool season. And they don't like the smell of the garlic bulbs. So you can grow a massive amount of garlic. You know, you can plant it about every 1/2 inch apart so that you create an impenetrable barrier. And that will keep the voles from going into your beds and eating the roots of all your plants. Now, another product that helps with voles for anything new that you're planting is really cool. It's really simple. It's called Vole King. And it's basically just these mesh metal bags that you pop the plant into and then plant it in the ground just like normal. And that bag prevents the voles from going in and eating the really important central root zone. And those come in every size from 2 quart to 35 gallon. So especially if you're buying an expensive tree or shrub that you want to make sure you have extra protection, it's worth like the $10 for the Vole King bag because it's your insurance policy.
That's really great advice. Yep. And you know, it's just part of gardening. It really is. We have to, it's not an easy road that we go down, and it usually happens when we are, you know, just getting ready to harvest or having a party the next day, and it looks like, you know, the armadillos have come through, and
they're jerks. They know how to make it hurt, you know, and they know when you spend a lot of money on something, and that's what they go after first.
Right.
So.
Yes. Erin says a lot of your photos have pumpkins and squash as ground cover. Do they cover and swarm over the other plants? And I'm going to throw sweet potatoes in there too. I mean, how do you navigate those squash vines to make sure that they're staying at least in their boundaries a little bit?
Well, now in recent years, squash borers are basically preventing that from happening because the stupid squash borers get into the plant and the plant really isn't developing as it used to. And that's a lesson for me in making sure I do a better job with crop rotations, and also, you know, keeping up with, hand pick those stupid squash bugs off. And I've gotten totally immune from being grossed out from squeezing them in my fingers. And I'm sorry if that grosses you out, but I don't know how else to deal with them. Pumpkins, I've had a lot of issues with pumpkins in the last few years as well. And I attribute that to not doing my due diligence in moving these plants around enough.
Okay.
And that was another big part of my realization for the importance of, you know, rotating where I plant things, which is a big benefit of foodscaping because it opens up more square footage versus having that isolated section that you grow food in. And you really don't have the opportunity to rotate things as efficiently as you need to.
Yeah.
Now, back in the day when I was having success with those plants, it was a near daily basis of having to go down and relocate those vines, and started using a lot of cattle fence panels to train those things up and over so that they wouldn't climb all over all of the plants, but I could still grow them in that space. And I get those cattle fence panels from Tractor Supply.
Okay. They are not a sponsor of our program today.
They are not. They just offer practical things, and they're nationwide. So it's an easy company to tell people, well, you can find this there because they're like every 10 miles here in North Carolina.
Right. Hang on just a sec. Okay, yes. All right. So we're going to go on to the next question. And we love the foodie fire pit and other projects in the book. What new projects are you working on?
So my newest project, I'm obsessed with growing rice because there's no rice to be found in the grocery store anymore. And my diet revolves around it. I have alpha gal from a tick bite, and I really have a lot of problems eating wheat now. So I depend on rice as like my main carbohydrate. So I am developing a rice area around my feed tank, which is a hillbilly swimming pool. but I love it and I highly recommend it. It also came from Tractor Supply. So this is a lower area in my sandy landscape that I've put in a lot of organic matter, and it's about 300 square feet. It's not massive, but I'm gonna plant in a rice paddy this year. So you should totally follow that progress. And I've been doing a lot of rice in pots with no holes because it does really well, and you could put it on a wooden deck and it's not going to rot the wood underneath, which is a big problem. It also just looks really cool, and most people have never seen rice, so it's kind of a fun surprise element for when people are allowed to visit again, if that day comes.
I hope it does come. So do you really think we could do it here in Florida? I know we have a native rice here in Florida. And do you think we could really pull it off? And what variety are you growing?
So I do. I know that you can grow it in Florida because there are rice growers in your region.
Okay.
And rice is native to tropical frost-free zones. So it likes heat and humidity, and it likes rain. It likes daily rain. So yeah, of all the grains, I feel very confident in saying both rice and sorghum are very heat tolerant. I believe they would survive in your climate through the summer. I grow a number of varieties. Like, I basically have the philosophy that I will grow any variety that I can find online because I'm a hoarder of plants. And I've had a lot of success with Carolina Gold, which of course is a heritage variety that came from Charleston. I'm also growing a variety that I've got from Hancock Seed. So you can look up hancockseed.com. This is a seed supplier out of South Georgia, and they have a great sort of all-purpose rice variety that you can buy, 1 pound up to 10 or 15 pounds, depending on how ambitious you are. And I can tell you, it germinates within 7 days, and typically rice will start to bloom as the days get shorter. So it's actually a day length trigger. It doesn't have anything to do with temperature. So it's usually around late August or into September when it starts to put up its flower spikes, and then 2 or 3 weeks after it started to bloom is when you would start to harvest your seed. So it's a great plant to grow through the long hot days of summer, and then you have something really interesting to be able to harvest. And whether you want to harvest it to eat or just harvest it to use in a dried flower arrangement, I will be putting up tutorials on how to harvest it and process it for consumption this summer.
Okay, great. Good. And so you are growing some in your feed tank. You've done that before, or the water trough, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned in the book that you had tried to grow some veg in the water trough, the galvanized steel water trough, and you had some issues. Could you revisit that for me?
Yes. So don't use galvanized feed tanks for aquaponics. They are zinc lined, and that will kill the fish very quickly. But what you can do is put soil in. And so, the soil acts as a buffer, and then your plants won't have any zinc toxicity issues. But when you're doing it in straight water, it poses a lot of problems.
Okay.
So, yes, if you're growing in feed tanks, particularly the silver, feed tanks that you can buy, use those for adding soil to and then growing plants in.
Good. Okay, next question. Okay, when root knot nematodes, your not best friend, kept you from growing in-ground heirloom tomatoes, you switched to aquaponics and aeroponics. You decided to pivot. You decided not to give up. I just kind of want you to talk a little bit about that struggle, because I've known people who've just given up, but you didn't.
Well, it's easy to just wash your hands of it, you know, because you're gardening for pleasure. And when you have too many failures, it really, you start to question why you're putting this effort. And I still have these struggles like anyone else. But I decided after visiting Epcot that I can't I can't not engage in these new methods, which are likely going to become more and more a part of our agricultural system. And
Mhm.
so, like, for me, all of this started from visiting the land when I was down there with FNGLA, and it was just such a life-altering experience. Like, I remember visiting there when I was about 12, and, you know, seeing these, you know, these towers that they have in there, and not fully registering what it was they were doing. And as an adult, I just was like, I can't miss this opportunity to try it myself. And my experience has been really positive, particularly with the aeroponics system. I've pretty much given up on aquaponics. The areas where I do have fish, I have gotten rather shady, and I think the fish appreciate that shade because the water stays cooler. So I just let those be tanks of fish and frogs. They live harmoniously together. And I focus now primarily on aeroponics, specifically through the tower garden. And that kit is, you know, it's an investment, but it's so prolific. And the tower garden was actually created by the person that started the land at Epcot.
Oh, okay.
So the technology is mirroring what Epcot is doing. And it's a fantastic program. Right now, mine is completely full of Swiss chard and kale, but this week I'll be harvesting all of that and transitioning to heirloom tomatoes. And I grow 28 different varieties of tomatoes in that tower for the duration of summer. And I get probably somewhere between 800 and 1,000 pounds of tomatoes each season from that one tower.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's very low maintenance. Like, I would never classify tomatoes as low maintenance, but growing them in that aeroponic system has been transformative.
Very good. And you know, usually for us in the ground and even in our raised beds, if we pretty much need to be wrapped up with full-size tomatoes by July 4th, I usually say. So
Yeah.
what kind of season extension are you getting out of those towers?
Well, you know, I'm able to grow year round. 365 days of the year, I have something growing in that tower. Um, Now for Florida, because you are hotter than we are here in North Carolina, what I would probably say with the tower, it comes with wheels. So you can actually like move it into a veranda or into the shade, and you might be able to actually extend that summer season or
Mhm.
do another round of things like maybe even cucumbers or what else do y'all grow in the summer? Like peppers might be
Yeah.
more tolerant, okra, you know,
Yeah.
other things that are sensitive to some of the in-ground soil issues, but would grow in water systems, and they do really well.
Mm.
I know that there's a lot of tower garden users in Florida, and
Absolutely.
I often see them, you know, with their tower in their screened porch pool area,
Yeah.
and they're growing produce all summer long.
Right, right. And you know, talking about Epcot, during quarantine or our stay at home, one of the things I've really missed is going to the Flower and Garden Festival. That's kind of like, that's in my top 5 of what I'm missing the most. Because we learn so much, we get inspired, we see stuff, you know, and we're there with all the other plant junkies, which I just love. So
I think
hopefully,
that is the greatest example of horticulture, at least in this country, but maybe global. You know, I think what Epcot does is something that we can all take inspiration and try. You know, at least try a little part of it. I've been reliving my Epcot experiences on a near daily basis just so I stay motivated.
yep. Okay, so our next question is, to our readers out there. Did anyone add edibles to their landscaping this month, and what's in your foodscape? So head to the chat box or to the comment box, because I want to learn what you added. And so does Brie.
I do. I'm jealous of you being able to grow citrus. I have climate envy.
Yes.
I've considered relocating to St. Pete where I have a dear cousin, and I always think, oh my gosh, zone 10.
Wouldn't that be? And you can plant mangoes and avocados. Okay, so we've got
Ooh.
blueberries, fennel, Russian red kale, culantro, muskmelon transplants, lemongrass, chives, rosemary, cholesterol spinach, and several herbs, cherry tomatoes, onions, chives, pineapple, Thai basil, sweet basil, and calendula, oregano, sorrel, along the walkway to the front door, peppers, cucumbers, squash, and someone planted peanuts.
Yes.
Kristen planted Seminole pumpkins. Brie, are you familiar with our Seminole pumpkins that we grow?
I'm not, but I clearly need to be.
You clearly need to be, because they are very tolerant of the squash vine borers, and they produce beautiful, delicious pumpkins.
Okay, I'm going to order seed as soon as we're finished.
My friend Kathy Benson is growing fancy small eggplant. We've got blueberries, butternut, acorn squash, peppers, bush beans, Okinawa spinach, mountain tomatoes, and they're going to be in the pool enclosure.
Yes.
Blackberries, red basil, which sounds awesome. Eric Munks has put in perennial peanut, which isn't an edible, but it's going to do beautiful for fixing nitrogen in the soil. And Susie Lyons is growing roselle along the walkway. Brie, do you grow roselle at all?
I love roselle. Yes. It's so beautiful and so delicious.
Yes. And my friend Martha Crozier she has a new Lakeland limequat. And limequat is a cross between a kumquat and a Persian lime, and it gives you a sweet little lime that's perfect for gin and tonics and for margaritas.
Oh my God, I need that.
Yeah. Brie, you probably could grow the limequat inside, and then bring it out in the summer.
See, you guys are going to make me order a bunch of plants now. You've gotten me so excited.
So my friend Rita Law has a patch of Seminole pumpkins. I bet we can get Rita to save you some seeds, because that's.
Oh yes, and Southern Exposure has it on their website, so I'm ordering it right now.
Good. Rustico Splain asked what plant was just recommended for her to purchase. A Seminole pumpkin, Rustico. Anna from Lee County, which is Fort Myers, says, this is the first time my mango tree is having fruits, and she's waiting for them to ripen and eat. And she can't grow vegetables because her neighborhood is too strict. We do have Florida legislation that will allow you to vegetable garden, but it's a little bit of a path that has to be navigated. And Anna, if you contact me, I'll send you a fact sheet on kind of navigating those legal waters to get you to be able to get your veggies in the front yard. Rebecca's growing avocado trees, and yeah, everybody seems to be motivated. Brie, I'm going to slide back up here to this one question, because
and I have to tell you all, if you have extra Seminole pumpkin seeds, every place is sold out online. So I'm desperate now to grow this.
Yes.
So if not this season, think of me when you have seed later on, okay?
Let's see what we can do.
Oh, Martha, thank you. Thank you.
The next time you're in Alachua County, we'll go over to Martha's place, because her garden is awesome, and she also makes very nice cocktails. So Lisa Athern mentioned early on, she said she really enjoyed your book. In particular, she loved the way you framed the information with the idea of starting a revolution with what we see in our yards. And she works in communication, and she really thinks that half the battle in changing behavior is knowing how to frame the communication for behavior change. What do you think are the most important factors to consider in communicating change to promote the Foodscape Revolution?
I wish I had a more articulate answer, because I asked myself this question, and I don't come from marketing and communications. I'm a plant nerd with a horticulture and entomology degree. but what my goal has always been is to make people feel more empowered by the little space they have, no matter how small or how large. I think the one thing that's missing from ornamental landscaping is this function. Uh, you know, I love ornamental plants, but I also think that if I'm devoting this time and energy to maintaining that space, I deserve the opportunity to get something more from it. And I think growing something to feed your family is a very empowering part of land management. And that's what I have always hoped, that people would be able to open their eyes to be able to see that you don't have to be a farmer to be able to grow something you eat. And our landscapes are this incredible opportunity. But if you have ideas for marketing this, I would love to hear them.
Yeah. I think that the more that we could share this book and share the concepts, and that gardening is beyond the box, think outside the box. You know, there are issues that go with growing your edibles right next to your landscape. You know, it could be watering, it could be fertilizing, it could be exposure to your lawn crew or weed and feed or andro. But you know, if you can get over those barriers, and kind of think outside the raised bed box to get those edibles in there, I think you're getting a lot more for your efforts, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's not that you can't have raised beds, but maybe focus on growing the harder to grow things in those spaces, and then concentrate easier things like herbs, or ground cover things in your landscapes that don't require as much effort or are better paired with your ornamental palette. But your landscape offers a lot of square footage. A few years ago, I did a survey for North Carolina Foundation Landscapes, and that's just the space that surrounds your house. It's usually about 4 foot wide and, the length of your house. And in that space, you have the equivalent of 40 average size raised beds.
Wow.
So why not take advantage of that open space between your existing shrubs to grow something you eat? I mean, no one in their right mind would build 40 raised beds. I mean, that's thousands of dollars in lumber, let alone the upkeep. So, the idea is just to really think creatively and take this as an opportunity to be able to make your landscape dynamic and change with every season, because those permanent plants are there, but these seasonal vegetables are going to change every couple of months, and it affords you this opportunity to be really creative.
Right, to be creative. PK said the book and club has definitely made me feel more empowered to do this. And so she's totally grateful to you and to the group. And now you know how smart master gardeners are, right?
I do. I love master gardeners. Thank you, master
so
gardeners.
Heather said people really respond to challenges. Maybe have a 60-day challenge for growing something to eat. And in my brain, I was thinking rice. Why not, maybe when you're teaching us how to harvest and everything, maybe call for a challenge for 2021. That might be something fun to do.
That would be so cool. Yes.
See how smart master gardeners are? Somebody asked about growing, what vegetables do better in the shade. For me, I always kind of lean toward the leaves doing better in the shade, but what's your thought, Brie?
I agree. Leaves, and then maybe some smaller root vegetables, things like radish. I've grown some daikon radish in a considerable amount of shade, and they don't produce as large of an edible root, but you could grow them. I've also had some success with carrots. Same situation, they don't grow as large, but you still get something that's harvestable. But primarily I focus on leafy greens, lettuce, spinach, chard, kale, mustard.
Collard?
Collards, yeah. And those things, if you have deciduous shade, will do really well through the cool season when the leaves are down. And maybe, again, along your border edges where you might have a little bit more sun exposure. I know I have a terrible time growing anything edible under my live oaks. They're just so dense and dark, and those oak trees absorb every drop of water that I've pretty much gone. I do grow mustard under my live oaks,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm able to harvest for, about 3 months. And right now my mustard is bolted. It's providing nectar for pollinators. And then I'll mow it all back down, again, as that organic matter, as a green layer, like basically a green mulch. And then it will self-sow, so I don't even have to keep replanting it.
Right. Yeah, there are quite a few things that self-sow. I don't think you talked too much about that in the book.
I think I address that more in Gardening with Grains,
Okay.
where I really dive into this whole ground plane coverage, mowing in place organic matter cycle, where, I'm trying to emulate what good farming practices are and break down how to do that for a residential landscape, because it's different. Farmers have equipment and, big open space. And so it's like, well, wait, how do you actually do that in and amongst, a camellia or an oleander, or, whatever ornamental plant you have? And so that's been my big experiment the last 4 or 5 years, is trying to take these organic farming practices and applying them to a landscape so that I can give better advice.
Right. And we don't have a center pivot. We got to figure out how to get the hose or the watering can over there,
Exactly.
All right. I think we got one more slide. So we love this quote. Let me tell you, a hole from a bug is not the end of the world, but having no insects in the gardens definitely could be. So, we have a lot of insects here in Florida that we battle, but I feel like there's a harmony that could be struck.
I think one of the things that we all struggle with is, how do we deal with the bad bugs and not kill all the beneficials? And I don't think that we are providing services yet, especially from, professional providers. I think we have a lot of work to do to better understand biocontrols and bringing in beneficials that will actually take care of some of the problems. And insects are going to keep evolving. And I know you guys in Florida are like a petri dish for problem bugs. But I don't think the answer is just spraying pesticides on everything, because that leads to bigger problem insects in the long run. So I don't have all of the answers for it, but I do know that the more diversity that you can have represented in your landscape, the more likely you will be to have good bugs that will ultimately eat the bad bugs.
Right.
And, that's always my goal. Like when I see a wasp nest, I just jump with joy, because I know they're going to parasitize all my hornworms.
So they're out there working. I also think about birds,
Yes.
I think about the wrens and the bluebirds and the other insect eaters, just by maybe putting out a bird bath with a little bit of dripping water, or a bluebird box somewhere by the garden or in that area. That, we know that some of these birds are eating 400 or 500 caterpillars a day. So just kind of creating that environment where we're trying to strike that balance.
I agree. I think it's really about looking at your yard as an ecosystem in which everything plays a role. And that's hard, because I think up to now, it's sort of like the food pyramid. And, in your garden, we were on top and we controlled everything. And it's going to take some time for people to shift their approach to it. But now is a great time to really think a little more critically about how we all fit into this cycle.
Yeah.
And just blank spraying pesticides really isn't going to be a long-term solution.
No, it's not. And I think, one of the things that we found here in Florida is that people, they don't think that they are putting out pesticide because they're not directly doing it, but we do a lot of fire ant control. We do a lot of, other insect control that we don't think necessarily is part of it, but really any pesticide that you're putting out is going to impact the system. And I'm not saying
Yes.
that I hate pesticides, but I'm just saying that, you know, really consider those impacts and the consequences.
I try to be reactive instead of proactive now, which is a totally different approach than I had even 5 years ago.
Mhm.
You know, I have had a pesticide applicator's license for 20 years. You know, I came through traditional ornamental horticulture, so this has been a transition in my thinking as well. But I don't just put out. I don't have the pesticide guy come and spray my lawn anymore. I wear bug spray and I treat fire ants as I see them
Mhm.
instead of doing what I used to do, which was to broad spectrum treat everything.
Right.
And it's definitely made a difference in the biology that's existing out in my landscape now.
Absolutely. And Bree, do you know why Florida gardeners wear flip-flops?
No,
So
you
we can,
shouldn't.
so we can find the fire ants.
Right. So you should definitely be wearing closed-toe shoes. Those fire ants hurt.
Right. I'm reminded of that. Let's see. Susie Lyons, she's talking about the little big farms being biodynamic, and we're talking about, you know, we are talking about looking at it as a system and the dynamicness of our landscapes.
And you know, a lot of what this is just permaculture, just written in a way that feels more accessible for people living in the suburbs like me, because permaculture often indicates living off the grid. And I think those practices are absolutely applicable to our landscapes, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just when you have to know what those principles are, and then you can apply them. So that kind of segues into our next book. Our next book is going to be the Pollinator Friendly Gardening Book by Rhonda Fleming Hayes. She's actually a master gardener from the North Midwest, and I have it here. So this is our new book. And we asked the UF-IFAS bookstore to carry this book for us, and I believe that they have it, or you can get it online, or you can go to other sources. But I believe the IFAS bookstore is offering a 25% discount. Wow. So that's going to be awesome. That's where I'm going to get my book from. So this is a really great book, and we are excited to get started with it. And it's the foreword is written by P. Allen Smith. So if Allen Smith says it's good, it's got to be good. And I'm really hoping that you all will join us for the Pollinator Friendly Gardening book read. And we will be using the same MGB book club page on Facebook, and then follow us on Instagram as well for that. So Brie, any closing statements for us? We have enjoyed this book so much. We've enjoyed connecting with you, and we've enjoyed meeting you a little bit more deeply and kind of understanding your garden and where you're coming from.
I just want to thank you all. You were my brightest spot through this strange COVID chaos. And thank you all who ordered books from me. It was like the greatest joy to get to sign them and ship them. And many of those days, the only reason that I had to leave the house was to go to the post office. And I really, really, really appreciate your support and interest. And I wish you all the best. And I hope you'll keep in touch and, you know, send me pictures of your foodscapes, because it brings me so much joy to get these emails and see people taking these words literally and applying it. It makes every day worth living, you know?
Good, Brie. Yes, thank you so much. You've really impacted and inspired us. And I'm so glad that, you know, if I lack inspiration, or if my enthusiasm seems to dip a little bit, I just pick up your book and I'm rearing to go again. So I'm so thankful that you could be with us today, and I'm just so happy that we did this. You were our first book, so I really appreciate it.
You guys are so amazing. I just endless gratitude to the Florida Master Gardeners and to everybody that I got to meet last year in October.
Mhm.
I think back to that amazing symposium with the happiest memories, and I just wish we were all having those events again right
I
now.
know. Virtual hug. We'll hug you
Virtual
virtually.
hugs.
All right, everybody. So we're going to wrap it up and go ahead and get your next book to read and send Brie your photos. I think it'll keep making her day.
It will.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.